Welcome and welcome to the very first ever video of Emerging Horizons. We're planning to set up a whole series of videos on the most interesting topics on what's happening in blockchain land. From one side, the technical side, the other side, the most interesting projects that are out there and the most interesting startups. So we're planning on inviting a lot of people who are working on the really fundamental stuff in blockchain world, but also the interesting startups who are really delivering products and services to the end users in order to make sure that we as an ecosystem start growing to the level that we want to grow to. And my first ever guest that I have at the table, I'm very proud that he's here. It's a long friend for me in the blockchain space. I calculated it this morning. It's more than 7 million blocks on the Ethereum network ago that we met. Is Daniel Haudenschild. Daniel, welcome today, and very glad that you're here.
Thank you.
Obviously you're the former EY partner that was very enthusiastic already years ago on the blockchain space. You've been the CEO of Swisscom Blockchain. We're both honored to be on the Lattice 80 Blockchain 100 leader list, whatever that means. And right now you are the CEO at Cybex and also the president of the Crypto Valley Association. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Thank you very much for inviting me here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I said, it's completely my honor and cool to have you on this very first show, actually. We're going to talk about what you're doing at the moment, what's happening in Crypto Valley at the moment. But first, I want to kick off with two 30-second questions. And I'm going to ask that to basically anybody who's joining me at the table or any project that will be on the table. And the first one is, what do you see right now as the most interesting development in blockchain land?
I think the most interesting development from my perspective is that we really see some of the infrastructure pieces that are necessary for blockchain and digital asset in general are starting to fall into place. Because for a while it was crypto wallets, and then people trying out with Bitcoin a little bit and a little bit of Ethereum, and then they realized, oh my God, if I'm my own bank, that means I need to take on a certain amount of responsibility for what that is, right? And then they realized all the different pieces that were missing, right? And what we're seeing now is that some of those pieces are coming into place by clever entrepreneurs, right?
Cool. And the other side, obviously, we are somewhere between the peak and the bottom of the hype cycle. Is what is the most overhyped development in blockchain land at the moment?
At the moment, I'm a really not a big fan of IEOs, right? Initial exchange offerings, right? I think these are people don't realize that it takes $20,000 to create an exchange, and they think that there's a certain degree of safety, that it's not a pump and dump, right? They don't realize that the exact same mechanisms that we're pumping dumping ICOs are doing those for IEOs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Once we have to use new marketing words in order to push an old product, you always have to be careful, I would say, in this case. Hey, let's start talking about your new project or your new company, Cybex. You started at the beginning of this year. You had the first press release in June, and if I'm correctly, in September you're going to release your alpha version for your first live version of your product. So Tell me a little bit more about Cybex. What is it, and what is it that you guys are delivering to the end customer? So
if you, it's always Bob and Alice when we talk about Bitcoin, right? So if you're Bob and you've got 1,000 Bitcoins and you want to sell it right now, you have no possibility of doing that in a way that's efficient and doesn't impact the market, because the digital asset marketplaces are so sensitive to larger movements. And 1,000 Bitcoins at the moment, something like $11 million. You'll see the impact of that movement, and you might cause something where you actually receive less than the market price, right? So you're forced to go to OTC desks, right? Mm-hmm. And this is one of those infrastructure pieces that's missing, right? So the OTC desks are pen and paper nightmares, right? And the ones that exist are broken and almost always prone to things like front running. So what Cybex is an organized off-market trading venue. We are a software manufacturer, and we manufacture the software that allows people to trade between Bitcoin and Ethereum directly, peer-to-peer, without any central influence.
So really working on interoperability between those two chains, basically.
Yeah, so which also includes any of the element side chains of Bitcoin, but also all of the ERC type derivatives of Ethereum, right? So it's effectively you can go from USDC or USDT to gold and to Brent crude or whatever other assets are represented.
And completely peer-to-peer. So that also has impact on regulatory parts, like we talked before, FATF. That apparently doesn't apply to peer-to-peer still. That is still linked to the exchanges, right? Or
yeah, we're a complete non-custodial solution, right?
Okay.
So we don't even have a centralized order book, right? It is a software product that institutional traders can use in order to facilitate the mechanisms that allow them to trade between chains, right? We've seen a lot of inter-chain decentralized exchanges. As far as we know, we're going to be the first commercially operating cross-chain.
okay, very cool. So like I said, September is going to be the alpha launch.
Yes.
Is it open to anyone, or is it pre-registry that you have to do before you can use it, or how does it work?
Well, so we have a global reach. We have got offices in Switzerland and in Hong Kong. We're backed by venture capital in Asia and in the US. And what we have, therefore, is a selection of 50 seats that we're going to be starting with in order to make sure that there's enough liquidity on the platform while still being in a friendly customer circle. And after that, it's institutional operators of cryptocurrency. I don't think this is not a retail offering, and it's also mostly for the people that are really trading crypto.
Okay. Moving on to your role as president of the Crypto Valley Association. Obviously, a lot of things happening in the Zug area, and for years already. It's one of the hotspots in the world with regards to blockchain. Yeah, what are the top 3 to 5? I'll leave that up to you. Most interesting projects / startups that you see happening in the Zug area that you really want to share with our audience that we have to follow?
Well, what I really like about the Crypto Valley Association is it has an extremely strong brand, right? And with that brand, it was around before even those 7 million blocks, right? So what's happened is that all the interactions with people, and we've got over sort of 7,000 subscribers in that ecosystem. If you look where those guys are now, they're the ones at Kraken and Binance and all of these cool projects, right? So that's quite nice. And what I've seen is that this international reach is extremely effective, right? The one project I think that comes to mind as being one of the most interesting one is something that Bernard Lapp is working on. Yeah. He's taking Swiss blockchain companies and bringing them to the favelas in Brazil and helping kids code their way out of poverty.
Cool.
And he's doing so, and it's something the Swiss companies have something of it as well, because like if I'm creating a peer-to-peer something or other, and I want to test it on a real market, right? They go down there, they have users, everybody downloads, everybody understands, and they're starting to work with a couple hundred people for a few days to really test their system and their solution, and then they come back with valuable input of how it really works in the field, right? Yeah. At the same time, the kids that are there have an opportunity to learn how blockchain really works, what are the use cases, and have an effect, right? And he's done this now. It's the second year he's doing sort of 6 cities tour with Sao Paulo and Brazil and a couple other places.
The Latin tour that he does. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a really fantastic use. I'm also a big fan of a company called BitBrain, and because if you think about it, how do you know if you're about to hire somebody how good they really are, right? Yeah, you could look at their GitLab and whatever, but that technically for the programming part, okay. But their understanding of blockchain, their business acumen, and all the other kind of ingredients that you need to be effective in this field, you don't really know. And there's no Microsoft certified engineer or something similar, right? There are a lot of courses, but you don't really know the quality of those courses, and you don't know how many you really need to take. So BitBrain has gone around, created certificates on the blockchain and a curricula that actually shows you, okay, this person's done 144 hours, here are the universities that they've participated in, and it's a very strong idea, and I'm a big fan of that, right? Because education is a missing component, I think.
Yeah, well, I completely agree. It's for the past few years I've been doing some research on that field, and you see that we lack the future knowledge needs at the moment in order to really make things move faster at the moment. So I think it's a very good initiative. Any other interesting ones? I have one in mind, so I'm hoping that you will mention it. But let's see.
Well, I mean, I think that what we're seeing is that this is the valley of tears, I think, or the trough of disillusionment, or whatever it is in the blockchain space, right? And I think it's interesting because, blockchain startups in general were kind of like, hey, we don't need venture capital, we've got ICOs, right? Yeah. And then that didn't last very long, right? And now they're kind of, the venture capital guys are going like this, going, okay, come back to the table. And what you realize is that the companies that they don't really understand, what's a pre-money valuation, what is it composed of, what's my post-money valuation, what equity am I offering, what's a seed series, I've had people miss up seed series, A series, family and friends on, they just don't understand what the mechanics are. And that's before you even start getting into your pitch idea, right? Yeah. So the companies that are making it through this trough of disillusionment, it's very dry out there, there's not a lot of capital, it's difficult to pay people's bills, right? The consensus was minus 50% attendance this year, right? The biggest blockchain conference ever, right? And so,
although some people argue that the level of content actually went up by downsizing it in the amount of attendees.
Absolutely, the tourists are gone, right? Yeah. Nobody's coming to blockchain events to learn what it is and to try to figure out, and you don't have the desktop fusion guys or fission guys that say, we're going to tokenize this, right? And that's good. At the same time, real companies are struggling because there's a funding gap, right? Yeah. And it's kind of the funding gap that happens, in the VC space, right? And it's the VC guys are reluctant to join because they've been pushed away from the ICO space, right?
Do you see an improvement in that case? Because that's quite interesting for all the startups, basically, that they are improving the fact that they are willing to invest into blockchain companies.
I think it's a buyer's market at the moment, right? You can snap up some extremely good talent, but the funny thing about blockchain talent is that it goes where it wants to go, and it does exactly and only what it wants to do, right? It doesn't kowtow to corporate branding, right? And so that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
Which company were you thinking?
The one that I was referring to now. I'm really into DAOs lately, and what I really like, because they have the potential to overthrow business models as we know them, is what the guys of Aragon are doing. Yeah. And I really like them. And if I'm correct, they're Zug based, or partially Zug based. So how do you like Aragon yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. It's a model that you just know is going to have its time, and it depends on how long it's going to take before that time is accepted, right? I think we've seen some interesting things. MakerDAO is extremely interesting, right? We've seen some other constellations. We were actually thinking about a DAO, a type organization for the Crypto Valley Association, right? Because that would be almost the best structure that we could have for it, right? Because it's a membership association that's not for profit, but that's there to serve its members, right? So what better mechanism than a DAO, right?
Yeah, basically, and for the people who don't know, a DAO is an organization, or decentralized autonomous organization, basically in practice setting up an operational organization without employees that is run by the participants in itself, which is, to my opinion, very cool, because that's going to change a lot of things out there. So that was mine. So I'm very happy that you concur on that one. Yeah. Any other things that you want to add?
Well, I mean, so what's interesting, and I think this is just kind of a general warning, right? With Cybex, right, we're effectively helping people in crypto liquidity, and it's become a study of crypto liquidity, right? So where does liquidity come from, and what does it mean? And through this study, we've discovered some interesting things, right? One is that there's things out there like contract for differences, CFDs, right, which aren't backed by any underlying assets, right? So you can have exposure to a product, right? Like exposure to Bitcoin. And you see some big companies doing that, like Revolut offers exposure, right? Mm-hmm. But you can't actually move your Bitcoin off the Revolut wallet and put it somewhere else, right? You're just exposed to it. And then the question has to come is like, well, how much of that is actually backed by Bitcoin sitting in custody? Right? Yeah. And now what we've seen as well is that some of these larger exchanges, right, being exchanges and not the most scrupulous of beings, they offer trading, margin trading.
Yeah.
Right. So now you have algorithmic companies doing, T+1, T+2 margin trading between different exchanges.
Yeah.
That means there is no settlement, right? And there probably isn't that much actually underlying asset behind those things,
Okay.
right? So you have hundreds of billions of dollars moving on these things on a daily basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
The question is how much of that is actually Bitcoin's exchanging on the main net. And,
Yeah.
and it's really, really difficult to know right now.
So how can people weapon themselves against this?
Own the metal and the mechanics to have custody over your own Bitcoin.
Yeah.
The nice thing about being able to be your own bank is that you can do it, right? But you have to, you cannot, as soon as you then say, okay, but I want to trust these other people to do it for me, right? Then you start to exchange, the convenience of having somebody manage it for you with counterparty risk.
Yeah.
And I think what we're going to see is that, there will come a time when the Bitcoin price gets to a certain point, right, where companies will fold because they didn't actually go out and buy the Bitcoins and put it in a safety space, right? They just give people exposure, and that's really dangerous, right?
All right. So fair warning. So be warned in this case. Thank you very much, Daniel, for coming. Really love to have you on our very first video today. If you like this video, please like it just below here, and please subscribe to our channel, because we're gonna put in weekly webinars and weekly videos as much as we can about cool tech updates in the blockchain space, cool projects that are out there, and we'll try to gather as many as possible interesting guests to our show. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully see you next week during our second video. Thank you very much.